but for some people or for some countries, I haven't answered that. Would you really attribute this growth that we saw, the growth of 3.4%, haven't answered last year, to Nigerians getting more jobs? And I know why I'm asking. Will this growth be attributed to Nigerians, more Nigerians getting more jobs, or that money supply, production or productivity was high in the hands of those that are already existing?
Okay, in that case, you're asking two barrier questions. One, do I think that the level of unemployment has improved as a result of the growth in the economic activity, productive activity in the country? Or do I think that the growth had no impact on employment? When you begin to see growth, you are going to see some impact on employment. But there's also like what you call lag effect. That lag effect will mean that sometimes companies will first exhaust their installed capacity. Remember, I said earlier that the economy contracted. When the economy contracted, what that would have meant is that companies are supposed to, some companies retrenched, level of employment declined further. And at the time when demand increased in the subsequent year, what companies will first do is to stretch the existing employment, see if they can continue to produce to meet the improved demand for goods and services. It's only after they have exhausted the capacity of very retrenched installed resources or labor to produce more goods and services that they begin to go back to the labor market to employ more. So what you may have seen is that at the time when demand during that period, because of the lag effect, because if you also have to look at the sector that actually grew in the subsequent year, last year, the strongest growth we had in the entire year was in the financial services sector that grew about 10%. Then followed by the trade sector to produce more goods about 8%. And because the trade sector had a major contraction. So what you may have seen, so that growth is that at the time when demand during that period, the financial services sector is also not a sector that, because it's a sector that is migrating away from physical employment to last year. So you realize that the strongest lot of the value added, a lot of the additional value created in the financial sector, we are created followed by the investment sector, which would mean that it did not require migrating away from physical additional employment to last year. So you then the sector that actually had a lot of the additional or major sources of employment did not grow so much. Agricultural sector actually the agricultural sector for the year was only about 2.12% for the entire year. And that's a further decline from the previous agricultural sector growth in 2020, which would mean that in terms of employment, agriculture is the largest employer of labor in the country. That sector was not expanding. Then the other sector as a major employer of labor is the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector has some credit for the growth in the manufacturing sector because the manufacturing sector enjoyed and that helped them to produce at lower cost or their cost of production to reduce. Then we've also seen, because of the depression we had in 2020, we've also that improvement in consumption is not strong enough as to lead to increase in employment at the manufacturing sector. Some of the things we are seeing is that we need to have a stronger growth in consumption, because one of the weaknesses of the economy today is weak consumption, weak purchasing power, which has led to weak consumption. Because when you are manufacturing to the warehouses, you are manufacturing to the retailers' shop floors, and the ultimate consumption is not taking place. You find out that over time, your ability to the demand for your product will begin to decline, and your ability to sustain that production level will also weaken. So the growth we saw in the GDP may not have dovetailed or trickled down to the point where we begin to create so much employment. Of course, you can see some marginal improvement in employment, but I do not think we're going to see a material improvement in development employment, given also that more and more people are coming to the labor market, and the rate at people are coming to the labor market far above the rate of recovery we've seen in the GDP, as to absorb more labor than those coming to the labor market.
So from your explanation, I will take it to mean that perhaps the impact of the helicopter money that we saw in 2020 and also 2021, and even for the monetary authorities extending even moratorium right now to even next year, perhaps had an impact. Not necessarily that many Nigerians had jobs within the year 2021. I'll take it to mean that.
Yes, absolutely. I do not think so much jobs were created in 2021, because you have to assess what sectors were creating those jobs. I had explained that the sector that grew were not largely job-creating sectors. Even the manufacturing sector was enjoying some level of subsidy that helped them to produce at lower cost. And I also say, because you don't have so much consumer demand, money did not go into the consumer's hands. So actual consumption was not so strong as to trigger the level of production that will require them to ask for additional input materials.
Why I asked that question really is that GDP is about output, what you're producing, what I'm producing, goods and services, production and consumption. That was why I had to put in that question, and to see if indeed Nigerians had more jobs as a result of this improved GDP numbers. And I must say that this, since 2015, really, this is the strongest growth of this administration since 2015, because we've seen two recessions. Anyway. We've seen two recessions within this administration. We've also seen this is the highest growth so far, 3.4% full year. I'll come back to the agricultural sector a little bit later, but let's talk about other sectors that seem not to get into the news all the time, because anytime GDP comes out, we're always boxed into a corner of talking about manufacturing, agriculture, and perhaps services. But let's take a look at other sectors, even within the services sector. Sectors such as ICT, sectors such as real estate, sectors such as, you mentioned earlier, finance sector, not necessarily insurance. We also have sectors such as accommodation, arts and entertainment. How can these sectors be encouraged so that those sectors are more business and investment friendly, that will make the pie larger, that you get a lot of people in that sector?
Well, I think we already have a proof of concept, the telecommunication sector, which is now the third biggest contributor to the GDP. If you look at the structure of Nigeria's economy, you realize that agriculture still accounts for about 26% of the GDP, followed by trade, about 15.6%, followed by telecommunication, about 15.2%. And then after that, you have the manufacturing sector, and then followed by the oil and gas sector. And then you have the construction sector, the real estate sector, the financial services sector. Given that the communication ICT sector used to be an infinitesimal contributor to the GDP, and then policies of government encourage the growth of that sector, and that sector is 100%, let me say 100% driven by the private sector, because today they don't have public sector owned or operated telecommunications services. So what that means is that we can replicate the same concept that we did, and it wasn't an accident. It wasn't because we prayed. It was because we came up with the appropriate policies, did the licensing of the telecommunication operators, a transparent licensing system for investors to come in and acquire those licenses. And this sector, private sector investors have invested so much in infrastructure in that sector. They have miles to do. We now have optic fibers, several of them that have come into this country. We now have 3G, and they just the license to provide 4G services. And all those investments coming from private sector, all the government was doing is sit back come up with policies, come up with appropriate regulations. And when it comes to them, only recently, about 2 of them got license for the 5G. And each of them is paying about $273.6 million, which gives national port about over $500 million. And that concept can be replicated. Let's take for instance the construction industry. If we identify viable private sector, commercially viable infrastructural assets, and we are concession them to the private sector, we're going to get money from the concessioning. Private sector invest capital will come into those sectors. We create employment, we build infrastructure, and at the end of the day, we as a country will get the benefit of those infrastructure. But unfortunately, we're not doing that. We believe we can build infrastructure from budgetary allocation, which unfortunately, because of our lean resources, we are not doing that. I know the government has come up with some schemes that will allow private sector to build some roads. And unfortunately, they need to move faster because we're approaching the election period when whatever does not achieve some level of traction will be petitioned by a new government. So, but ultimately, we can use that to kickstart and grow the construction industry. The real estate sector, all we just need is develop infrastructures away from the centers of town cities so that people can actually build viable estates, live in upscale estates away from the city centers. But for that to happen, you must be able to commute to the city center. So you need likes of monorail that can take people to city centers so that they can live away from city center. They can actually live in up-country locations and commute to city centers to do businesses. But that will require infrastructure from government. I've talked about how we can do the infrastructure. And that way will expand the opportunities in the real estate sector. Today, the most viable real estate sectors are in Lagos and Abuja. And then you also look at the extant law in terms of getting approvals to develop properties, the process it takes to get approvals to build, and other taxes that govern construction industry or real estate industry in each location. We need to streamline these things and make it easy for contractors or real estate developers to get titles to their developments and also get approvals to build and all those things. And we must also make sure we have appropriate regulatory structures to monitor development so that we don't have the incident that happened in Lekki and Ikoyi repeat itself. That way we will have a more viable real estate sector. All these other sectors that you mentioned, the financial services sector, which accounts about 3.4% of the GDP today, that sector is largely driven by the private sector. And what we need is strong regulations, strong policies. The largest pool fund managers in the country today, other than the banks, are the pension fund administrators. And that came about as a result of policy. It was under President Olusegun that we came up with the Pension Reform Act. And today they are managing about 13 trillion naira in assets under management, driven by policy. So the key thing is that policy is important, leadership is important in coming up with policies and making sure that you have also strong regulations to guide each of, to define, protect, and guide each of these sectors that you want to stimulate.
Okay. Let's talk about the most talked sector, which is the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector is the largest employer of labor, but yet it doesn't have as much very high productivity, which we expect. What do you think that is missing? That's the A part of the question. The B part of the question is, do you also think we are getting it wrong in terms of saying that we've got to develop this nation through the agricultural sector? Because if you take a look at modern economies, they've moved beyond the 3 basic needs of life, which is food, shelter, and clothing. There are other things, basic needs of life right now. Those ones are fundamental. So are we also getting that conversation wrong in the country in terms of, let's build on agriculture, let's build on, we are blessed with this. It happened in the 50s and 60s. Should it be the kind of conversation that we should be having? That's the B part of the question. I hope you've not forgotten the A part of the question, which is largest employer of labor, but not so much of high productivity.
Okay, let me start with the A part of your question. The reasons why agricultural sector is not, of course, the growth of 3.58% was one of the highest in terms of quarterly growth. But like I said, full year growth was only 2.12%. The reason why agricultural sector is not as viable as it should be, multifaceted. I would like to capture some of those factors. One, we do not have our Land Use Act makes it difficult for people to gain access to commercial agricultural land. So you have a lot of agricultural activities is peasant. So it's based on physical sweat that people are using to cultivate the land. Two, we do not have supporting infrastructure. If someone infrastructure will come in form of irrigation, if we have irrigated areas, you may realize that we may expand the period, our cultivation cycle. Take, for instance, the southeastern part of the country, where you can actually have both the upland rice and the paddy rice cultivation. But unfortunately, in the southeast part of the country and the south part of the country, what you have only produced in a year. So critical infrastructure is missing. Third factor is the storage. We don't have storage facilities. Most of the silos are located in areas that the farmers are not even aware. To take the products from their farm gates to the silos is almost an impossibility. So you need to have storage facilities to reduce the wastages we have in the food products that are produced. You realize during the seasons, you have so much of commodity food items produced. Off-season, the quantity supplied is also quite low because you are unable to store them. Take, for instance, things like maize can be effectively stored, and you have a lot more of that available in off-season period. Fourth factor is the transport infrastructure that will allow you to take products from where they are produced to where they are demanded. Because of collapse of our transport road infrastructure, we don't have efficient rail infrastructure. You realize that where these food items are being produced, it's difficult to evacuate them to where they are demanded. And then the other factor is in terms of benefication, value addition, processing factories or industries that can produce some of these food items or some of these farm produce into semi-finished product or even fully finished product. We produce cocoa. We have it. We have a few of those cocoa products being utilized in terms of as a final product for consumption. We have cassava that you can turn into a starch. Most of those things are not being done here. So you need to address these 5 items I mentioned for us to begin to enjoy the benefit of farming as it is. Remember, taking us to the next aspect of your question, farming is an extractive industry. That is the first level of human commercial activity, or when people moved away from being hunter-gatherers and they began farming. So farming, as it stands today, in other countries of the world, farming is at best a source of having food security. Farming, the way we practice it, cannot be a basis for an economy to leapfrog into a developed economy. It will at best be a source of food security. It's necessary we produce and eat what we produce, so we don't depend on other countries for our food supply, but you are not going to transform it into a source of industrialization in today's world. It cannot be. Today, the world is talking of knowledge economy. Mm-hmm. They are not talking of extractive industries. There's no country in the world that is relying on extractive industries among the most developed countries of the world. It's all about the value additions, the kind of knowledge you have in your society. So we must farming and recognize what best it can achieve for us. It cannot be the source for this country to begin to compete with the likes of Malaysia or Japan or China or even India.
Okay, let's take a look at this from this prism, which is the stay-at-home order that is happening in the Southeast, at least for those states in the Southeast. Because when I took a look at these GDP numbers, every Monday, today is Monday, those Southeast states, it's like they're on lockdown. Many businesses are not going on right now. Are you seeing that this is also impacting the GDP? In no means, however small it is. And I'm really so surprised that the governors of the Southeast are just so mum about this, and everybody is just pretending as if nothing is happening. Quite a whole lot of insecurity going on there. I'm looking at the economic impact. So you can imagine if these Southeast states, which are highly commercial states where production or even consumption happens, distribution to consumption happens. What do you have to say about this? Because no one wants to talk about it. And I'm taking the plunge.
Interestingly, also, she didn't want to talk about it because I want to share away. I never share away from political activity, but because you are going to take it from
it's not political anymore. It's not political.
Yeah, because we're taking it from because
yes, economy. Yes.
The reality is when you lock down economies consistently every Monday, you are losing productive activities. If you take, for example, about where they produce shoes, produce leather bags, it simply means whatever is produced on a daily basis is lost because of the lockdown. But I also think that over time they will begin to circumvent it. Like the people who produce those things, they will stay in their shops and work all through the night and not leave their shops. But ultimately, we are having lots of productive activities in the 5 Southeast states. I have heard, I think one of the leaders of Igbo, former Ohaneze, the president, said, look, that the ongoing sit-at-home is no longer a directive of IPOB. That is basically some criminal elements that are involved in enforcing the so-called sit-at-home order. But you also look at the structure of the economy of the Southeast. A large percentage of the market activities there is in the rural areas. So what those people, the farmers, they go to farm on Mondays. They don't even know whether they talk of sit-at-home or not. But the entirety of the economy is suffering from the lockdown. And the earlier the leadership of that section of the country recognizes and rises up to that, the better for the society. Ultimately, a lot of people are peasants there. They live hand to mouth. So when you deny them of working on Mondays, you are denying them a percentage of their income for the week, more than 10% of their income for the week, maybe about 30% of their income for the week. For those who work 7 days, and for those who work 5 days, you are denying them something like 20% of their income for the week. So their standard of living will continue to deteriorate, the ability to meet their obligations to their family will continue to decline. And unfortunately, the political leadership may not be in a strong moral position to enforce, to counterbalance or counteract the efforts of the so-called enforcers of this. Because if they have strong followership, they can galvanize the people to oppose a few people who are compelling them to sit at home and suffer hunger.
Okay, Mr. Chukwu, I have one last question for you before you go. For those that will look at this GDP data, or perhaps even not for those, for Nigerians that would see this GDP data and perhaps want to, interpret it in ways that the MBS has released this data, how does it concern me as a business person, as an investor? Does this GDP data really signal new sectors that investors can come in, or even business startups, or even scale-ups? Are there some signals there in this GDP data that one can just take home and say, okay, I think these sectors could be doing well, or there is prospect that I could enter this sector as a business person?
Yes, absolutely. When you look at the GDP figure and disaggregate it, you look at what sectors are showing consistent growth or what sectors are recovering. I had mentioned that the financial service sector was the fastest growing the entire year, followed by the trade sector, then followed by the likes of telecommunication sector. And this sector that are growing fast are the sector that brought strong opportunities for investment purposes. The sector that are declining, we should ask ourselves, why are they declining? I mentioned agriculture sector, despite all the incentives going into that sector. The manufacturing sector, I've also talked about what is incentivizing growth in the manufacturing sector. We've talked extensively on what we need to do on the construction industry, the real estate sector. These are sectors. So what you look at is that what is the source of this sector and what are the potential for growth, and then what rate is it growing? And then if you see a gap between the potential growth capacity of that sector and what is growing, you see opportunities for investment. But it simply means if you do the right things in that sector, you see a faster growth and you can actually appropriate value, which you would have created in investing in that sector.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chukwu. Let's talk sometime again. Thank you for answering the questions, especially the one of the stay-at-home order in the southeast, because as we speak right now, those states are on lockdown. Nobody's working. Even banks do not work, financial services, and everybody's just keeping mum. It's really beats me. But thank you very much, Mr. Chukwu, for joining us on the show today. All right, I've been speaking with Johnson Chukwu, who is the Group Managing Director at Carriers, at the GDP numbers that were released just a few days ago by the National Bureau of Statistics. In case you didn't see that, please just go online, check it out, and, read those little details. Not even little, can just give you insights. You can also check out our YouTube channel, Moneyline with Nancy TV, and check out the interviews that we even did last week on the same topic from different angles. That media handle, so you can get on there right now, join our Twitter community by commenting, by sending your questions and your views. And I always talk about this YouTube channel. Just go on our YouTube channel and check out different interviews, different topics that we've conducted. Who knows, you may just have insight on some things that you've been looking for. All right, let's quickly take a break, and when we return, the program continues. Don't go anywhere. Hello, and welcome to the program. This is Moneyline with me, Nancy.
So we really have to keep thinking out of the box for how to get money to the least accessible in our society.
Everything has to be re-examined in our economy, in our health system.
We are also ensuring that government does not continue to manage this refinery, because government is not really equipped to manage refinery.
We need to come forward and do something different, so that we move from the situation of looking at things from it's purely a consumptive approach to a productive environment.
The government and the people need to really agree on the need for a departure from business as usual.
We are now on a process of recovery. It is what I call a bumpy journey to an uncertain destination.
This is Moneyline with me, Nancy Naji. It's so nice to know that you're joining us again today. All right, this time, let's quickly take the business news. The Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission has stated that the federal government expects the Fisheries Coastal Terminal Concession project, which is now being finalized, to earn about 5 billion naira. According to a statement from the Commission's acting head of media and publicity, Manji Yarlin, the project intends to improve fish exports while ensuring the terminal's rehabilitation and renovation, as well as the operation of fishing trawlers, among other things. The initiative is also anticipated to produce more employment and increase foreign exchange profits. Nigeria is taking more steps in promoting and drawing attention to geographical indications and other forms of intellectual property protection. This was revealed at a conference on national legal and institutional frameworks for geographical location in Nigeria. Emmanuel Aldo reports that the federal government says it's committed in ensuring Nigeria exports more finished goods and creating a living environment for the production of for the growth and expansion of the country's national geographical indications.
A geographical indication is a sign to identify goods as originating in a specific locality or region in a country, given that the quality, reputation, or other characteristics are essentially attributable to the specific locality or region and can be used for both agricultural and industrial products. Nigeria is a country that has one of the most culturally diverse society, with a popular product like tilapia fish, usika pepper, yori onions, ijebu gari, among others that can be placed with geographical indication. The country, however, lacks legal framework, leading to cultural misappropriation.
Nigeria has a strategic ambition to position itself as a major supply chain partner to key off-taker nations. Geographical indication will play a major role in helping Nigerian producers generate greater value for their products.
In other jurisdictions, geographical indication is supported by the government to ensure the farmer produce or process their product to a standard which we call the specification code. Government has to step in. And I believe with this process of putting a legal framework is one of those ways government can support that farmer to be able to get value for product from that community.
To prevent cultural loss of heritage and identity, and also economic preservation. Because as you all know, GI in other countries, whether it's champagne, whether it's Dutch Edam cheese, pasta, they command a premium. We in Africa deserve to have people pay a premium for our products.
It will also attract investors in the area, and I believe in totality the economy will be improved.
The intellectual property rights and innovation project in Africa is again drawing attention on the need to speed up the framework law for increased revenue on GI's products with the support of the European Union.
Establish this legal framework. There's been workshops, there's been teams that have been specifically trying to define what are the needs in order to develop the system, and then the protection of the geographical indications, identification of potential products that we have now here today at the hotel, and this is something that it is working in progress, and I think I'm very positive, I'm very optimistic that soon there will be this system established here in Nigeria.
I heard from the minister that the ministry is committed and government is also committed to improve the non-oil sector performance, and this is one key area that will assist in that regard. So we have commenced already that process, and very soon the draft bill will go to the Federal Executive Council, and then from there to the National Assembly.
The forum also called on the Executive Council and the National Assembly to take issues of GIs more seriously, as the European Union rakes about 75 billion euros on sales value for products protected under their geographical indications. Emmanuel Howdy reporting.
According to the federal government, 24 solar mini grids will be implemented this year under the following the crisis on a USE of 621 billion naira in Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited intervention for 21 vital road projects. The company has assured stakeholders that the cash allotted for the projects will be used solely for the intended purpose. Speaking at a meeting in Abuja, the managing director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Mele Kyari, said the company is committed to examine freight rates for carriers in order to pay operational costs. Also emphasized the perilous circumstances that truck owners are in, given present economic realities.
The condition of Nigerian roads, which NNPC has intervened to ensure quick delivery and also completion. We noted the concern by our stakeholders, particularly NATO, PTD, and NUPENG, that there's any potential for misapplying the resources made available for any other purpose other than the one we have highlighted. We agreed to work together to ensure that we monitor these projects closely so that they deliver on time and on cost, and also to ensure that the resources available are applied for that purpose only. Secondly, we are aware that truck owners have issues maintaining their trucks, even acquiring new ones, as a result of the difficult situation of the freight rates that we live with in the industry today. We have agreed to work jointly with the authority being the primary driver of this process to ensure that those freight rates are reviewed in line with the process that have already been put in place by the regulatory authority, and also to speedily go ahead and recommend an exit plan for government to deal with.
The Executive Secretary, Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, Simbi Wambote, says the implementation of the Nigerian oil and gas industry Content Development Act has created over 50,000 direct jobs in the local economy over the past 11 years. Wambote at a meeting in Lagos said the level of Nigerian content in the oil industry stood at around 5% before the enactment of the Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry Content Development Act in 2010. Adding that the implementation of the Nigerian content law resulted in an increase to 26% in 2016 and 42% as of December 2021. The federal government has been charged to focus more on revenue mobilization in order to reduce borrowing in the country. Ari Asian, IMF chief in Nigeria, gave the charge while speaking on Nigeria's debt profile.
The debt to GDP ratio in Nigeria is still very moderate. but it's growing fast. It was 29% a few years ago, now it's 36%, now projecting 43% by 2025. And this is because a fiscal profile that is not very favorable for that. So you have, because it can reduce deficits. On the other side, on the spending, if you have to spend with subsidies or have less taxes from the subsidies, and not only subsidies, other spending that are priority, defense and other sectors, then it's going to be very difficult to have lower deficits. So if you continue this path, eventually debt to GDP is also going to be a question.
The federal government says it is working hard to ensure that the European Union's prohibition on Nigerian beans exports is abolished in order to boost the country's export potential and improve the lots of stakeholders in the beans export value chain. Yabode Abe, Trade Promotion Advisor, Nigerian Export Promotion Council, Advocates Assistance Office, speaking at a technical session on value chain export development in Advocates to solve chemical residue in dried bean storage for export, said the measures included educating beans farmers and merchants on appropriate farming techniques and avoiding the use of pesticides indiscriminately. She added that the country's inability to sell beans to European nations has a detrimental impact on its GDP. As the 2023 general elections gather momentum, Nigerians have been advised to vote for leaders that will drive the economy of the country forward. Dr. Linus Okochip Center, while speaking on growing economic development through leadership on the program, stressed that Nigeria needs a leader. Nigeria needs leaders who are selfless and have proven track records.
And people didn't just come from the mass. They have antecedents, right? So when you are looking at the antecedent of these leaders, these people have they built anything meaningful? Have they been able to build something that impacted society beyond themselves? Have they been able to succeed in their personal lives and say they are men and women of honor? Do they have integrity? Do they have people that have honor and respect? Do they have a fear of God? These are critical things.
All right, that's it for the news. Let's quickly take a break. And when we come back, I'll be giving you some key points around what's happening in the market. The Money Market Brief comes up next when we come back from this break. All right, welcome back. Let's quickly take you through the markets. The NGX closed in the red last week. The broad index lost about 0.13%, as you can see on the screen right now. The Major index closed at 47,140. Market cap also depreciated last week as it closed at 25.4 trillion naira. The deals, as we saw last week, ended at around 24,767. Traded volume of shares at around 1.7 billion naira, while the value of shares traded last week ended at 30.7 billion naira. All right, let's move over to other markets, shall we, very quickly? Let's take a look at how the African markets, other African markets also traded. At least earlier today, the GS Africa was up in early trade by about 33 basis points. Ghana unchanged. NSC 20 up by 2/3 of a percent, while EGX 30, that's the one in Egypt, was down by 0.28%. Let's move over to the United States. As we saw, stock index futures are closing in the red on a Friday, but these numbers you're seeing right now, early morning numbers talking about the stock futures. We saw that Dow Jones Industrial Average, NASDAQ, as well as S&P 500, those three major averages closed in the red last Friday. There are ongoing tensions between Russia and Ukraine, and that is also impacting the market. Let's quickly move over to Europe and check out how the European markets are faring today. European market. Earlier this morning, you can see that it's quite mixed there. For the CAC run in France, it opened and trading as at that time you're seeing right at 10, that's 11 minutes after 10 our time, about 5 basis points in the red. The FTSE 100 in the UK traded just a little bit up, but not so significant, but 0.2% though. German DAX is also within that range. IBEX 35 down 0.25%. Let's move over to Asia. Asia also quite mixed there as we're looking at fears about the potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. It continues to weigh on global markets. China today held its benchmark lending rate with a one-year loan prime rate unchanged at around 3.7%, and that was in line with predictions from some analysts. Let's move over to commodities, and I'm starting with Brent. All prices are just close to $100 like play. You know, we're getting there, and the thing is that Nigeria is not reaping the benefits of having oil price trade at this. We're still producing, according to the MBS, last year our daily production was around 1.5 million barrels per day, and we've seen steady decline of production, because I think that the highest production we've had so far in terms of oil production, daily oil production, has been from I would say the fourth quarter of 2019, if I'm not mistaken, the fourth quarter of 2019 to about 2020. Okay, the first quarter of 2019 to about the first quarter of 2020, and we saw about 2.07 million barrels per day production. But now we're oscillating around 1.5 million barrels per day production. Don't also forget that there's the OPEC plus quota for us, but even at that, we're not meeting it. Natural gas is trading at $4.60. Gold is trading at around $1,897. Cocoa, it's down 0.70%. Palm oil is trading very handsomely this morning, or very beautifully this morning, close to 2% rise there for palm oil, crude palm oil, which we have a lot of in the country. So check out how much it is going for. $5,646. Brent is going for $93.60. Cocoa is going for $2,571. So I think I'll leave that story for another day, but I guess you can infer from what I'm saying that we should not just be a monolithic economy, we should diversify. People will say, yes, we're already diversifying. It's showing our GDP. Services is the highest so far in terms of contribution to the GDP, followed by agriculture and all of that. But we can do more, because I don't want to hear that word potential. That's what potential, I've disliked it now in the Nigerian culture. We have potential. But anyway, that's the show today. Thank you all for joining us. Please join us again tomorrow, same time on this channel. I am Nancy Naji. Be the best you can be the change that you want to see. Don't forget to join us on all our social media platforms. On Twitter, we are there. On Facebook, we are there. You can also find me on Twitter at Nancy_Naji. Don't forget to go to our YouTube channel right now and subscribe. Moneyline with Nancy TV it is. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Bye now.
To the Alaafin of Oyo, Oba Lamidi Atonda's side, the visit was necessitated by the Commandant General's passion for safety of school children across the nation, which led to the establishment of the female squad to stem the spate of kidnapping of children. Imonike assures the Alaafin and the people of Oyo State of the Commandant General's readiness to fight the scourge of insecurity in Oyo State, and that the Corps, under her watch, would continue to work very closely with the state government by providing credible intelligence information to nip crime and any infiltration or attack on schools in the bud. The Alaafin appealed to the Civil Defense Commandant General to domicile the School Safety Initiative Program in Oyo State, particularly to ward off apprehension and unnecessary fear of attack towards enjoying a violence-free learning environment for students and teachers. The monarch, however, commended the NSCDC Oyo State Command for living up to its responsibilities and specifically requested the female squad to fully participate in security operations and assured of his full support for the Safe School initiative, while calling on the people of Oyo State to give maximum support to the Corps. Operatives of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, have foiled attempts by syndicate to steal at least 2.7 billion naira from the Nigerian economy by pushing into circulation fake $4.7 million cash. According to the agency spokesman, Femi Babafemi, the operatives had, in the hours of Friday, the 18th of February 2022, intercepted a consignment sent from Lagos to Abuja at Abaji area of the Federal Capital Territory. Consequently, a controlled delivery of the parcel, counterfeit US dollars totaling $4.760 million, led to the arrest of a principal